Today in Jerusalem explores the Palestinian-Israeli conflict through the personal loss of two mothers, reflecting the conflict as seen through their eyes. Over 15 years have passed since the beginning of the Second Intifada, and the cycle of violence hasn't gone anywhere. It has simply changed its form. From suicide bombings to car rammings and knives, many Palestinians are still living in refugee camps without basic rights, and the word peace seems to have lost its meaning. Who will be courageous enough to bring it back on the negotiating table, and how many more mothers will have to lose their loved ones for nothing before someone wakes up? I'm joined in studio by documentary filmmaker Hila Medalia, who produced To Die in Jerusalem, and Robbie Damelin, whose son David was shot and killed by a sniper while serving in the Israeli army. She is also the international relations spokesperson of the Parents Circle Families Forum. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So Hila, I'd like to start with you and start with the film. You said the conversation reflected reality as it is and is a microcosm of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Do explain.
So I actually started the film in 2002, shortly after this bombing that portrays in the film happened. And I've been following the mothers of the two dead girls, the mother of the Israeli girl and the mother of the Palestinian suicide bomber, on this 4 years journey where at the end they met. And actually, though Jerusalem and the Haitian refugee camps is only 4 miles away, it was incredibly difficult to bring them together, actually physically in the same place. And I think that's and actually the way that the meeting between the mothers happened in the film is really reflective of reality today, unfortunately, still today.
The fact that both peoples are living so close, yet they have no chance of talking to one another or having I guess, a normal social interaction.
I wouldn't say it this way. What I would say is that, for example, my father was born in Safed in the north of Israel in '35. He grew up with a lot of Palestinians. In my generation, we saw Palestinians. You know, they used to work in Israel. We used to go sometime to the West Bank, and there was some interaction. And unfortunately, kids that are growing up today in Tel Aviv and Palestinian kids, they could very likely not see and meet each other in person, which I think is very tragic, because if we want to solve the conflict, I think the first thing is to actually know each other.
As people, Robbie, do you feel the same way, that once there used to be much more, I guess, personal interaction, and today that drift has only grown?
Oh, yes. If you go into an average classroom, an Israeli classroom of kids, says aged 17, and you will ask them, who of you have ever met a Palestinian? Probably be nobody. And who speaks Arabic? Maybe one in the whole class. And who's been overseas? Most of the class, but there's no interaction. And it's very true that if you don't know and you don't see the humanity on the other side, how will you ever solve this conflict?
It's a very good question, which many of us are asking ourselves all the time. I want to go back to the conversation between the two mothers. I personally felt like it was a missed opportunity. Maybe it does mirror society, but they weren't able to understand the other one's point. Why do you think that is, Robbie?
Well, I think that we work in a very different way in the Parents Circle. There's no such thing as instant reconciliation. You have to take a long time to make an emotional breakthrough. But it can also happen just like that. But that would be very rare. And I think each mother needs to come, even if she wants to shout at the other side in the beginning. And you will find that Palestinian mothers specifically that come to the Parents Circle, we are a group of 600 families, Palestinians and Israelis, who've all lost an immediate family member. But if they come, initially they start to talk about how the person died. It would be where the bullet went in, how far away, how much blood was there, and the whole graphic detail of the death. But the more they get a chance to tell the story, suddenly they start to talk about the person that died. And that's another step in healing. But this is a very long process. And also, perhaps if we had facilitated as bereaved mothers, it could have helped. I don't know.
I think there are a lot of ifs. So, for example, because we weren't able to bring them actually in the same physical place, the meeting happened over satellite. And I think that I would say, you know, if they were actually to meet in the same place, if there were no cameras, if they were facilitated, like there are so many ifs that it could have been different. But to me, the strength of this film is actually in the way it reflects. And unfortunately, as hard as it is to watch it and to see this, it's even not connect. I like to call it an impasse. It's almost like they're talking in a very, very different levels and they don't really meet. But I think that's unfortunately reflective of reality. And what's also, to me, I'm very proud of the film is that the film creates dialogues. It's like when people watch it, they can't ignore it. And then though the dialogue between the mother didn't really reach on a small scale of the two mothers a real reconciliation. I think that it creates dialogues in many, many people, and it, you know, there are millions of people who watch the film. So I think that's really the value that
and
the
film
greater
brings.
impact.
But I think also if there would have been the opportunity, okay, and because in the parent circle we have a certain standing, so that we can meet as mothers from both sides, and when you recognize the shared pain, and if these two mothers had been allowed, which didn't happen then, and I wish we would have known, and we could have got special permission, because we do that all the time. The parent circle meet. We have two offices, one in Tel Aviv, one in Beit Jala. We could have facilitated a meeting, and the example for that is we just had the mother of Abu Khder, who is, I would say, one of the most difficult, horrible events that happened. A young Palestinian boy who was killed by settlers and burnt alive. His mother came to the parent circle and has joined, but it took time.
Of course.
It took her having to be met on a unilateral basis by other mothers, because we share the same pain, and that empathy that comes is a natural bond. We become sisters without even knowing.
Absolutely, but for some reason in the film, although the mothers on some level did recognize the pain of a mother, they weren't able to really meet in the middle and see eye to eye. And I would very much like to talk about the role of mothers in this conflict and in the process of reconciliation, but we're going to first take a short break. When we're back, we're going to talk more about the documentary film To Die in Jerusalem. Don't go anywhere.
Israel, the Middle East, the world. Get your daily dose every morning on I-24 News. News from around the world to around the corner. I-24 brings you the top stories, the hard news, and analysis you need to know. Weekday mornings at 6 a.m. only on I-24 News. Fearless, timely, and always engaging. Every night, David Schuster brings the news from around the world to your front door. Watch Stateside, weeknights at 9 p.m. on I-24 News.
Welcome back. Still in studio with Hilam Medalia, filmmaker and director of To Die in Jerusalem, and Robi Damien, the spokesperson of the Parent Circle, a group of bereaved families, Israelis and Palestinians. When we left off, we spoke about the role of mothers in reconciliation. Well, first of all, tell us, Robi, as someone who's been very experienced now for years in this process, what is reconciliation in your eyes, and does it include forgiveness?
No. I think forgiveness is a very, very personal thing. And it doesn't mean that you all have to forgive in order to reconcile. It's personal. For me, it's part of what I'm doing with the man who killed my son. But that doesn't mean that that's a prerequisite for other people. The people who belong to our organization have to understand that the occupation has to end, because it's killing the moral fiber as well of Israel, even if you don't care about the Palestinians, and I care deeply. And we all agree that there has to be a framework for a reconciliation process to be an integral part of any future peace agreement. Because without that, we'll just have another ceasefire, like we'll stand on the lawn of the White House and hug each other, eat hummus, and not have a real lasting... Yes, I would be delighted to also have a ceasefire, but if we want something that will be lasting, it will have to include a reconciliation process, and women would play a very important role in that.
I think that the two mothers, and bringing the conversation back once again, the Israeli mother really wanted the Palestinian mother to say, this is not the way. Right. She's like, she kept repeating the point, just tell me that you don't believe that violence is the way, and she didn't get that because the Palestinian mother only wanted to hear, please recognize the way we live. Please recognize our refugee condition. What do you think you could have done differently?
I think that though, you know, I left, actually when we shot the meeting, I consciously made a decision to be with a Palestinian family, and I had a very close Palestinian friend who actually the Israeli mother also knew him very well, be with her, because I thought that, you know, I'm there, I'm very close to them. They always used to call me to say that I'm there, that they're my Palestinian parents. You know, we were very close over the course of the years. And so I was hoping, and I was very depressed after the meeting, but I want to share with you one thing. First of all, that there is, I find also hope within this meeting. That, you know, the meeting lasted for 4 hours. And the reason why it lasted for 4 hours, that when we shot the meeting over satellite, I had to actually book the satellite time before. It's not like phone that you can just pick up. And I said, you know, 4 hours, there is no way it will be, you know, longer. And then what happened was that, you know, it was super long. And none of the mother actually stood up in the middle of the conversation or said, you know, I'm done. And they kept staying there. And, you know, always people ask me, so what was there? And I said, you know, it was really more of the same of what you see in the film. And to me, this is where I find hope, because I think though this impasse, as I call it.
And that's perhaps the strength of mothers who did see perhaps an opening, and in those 4 hours weren't able to make it, but they kept trying. Robbie,
you know what I would have done differently?
Yes.
I mean, I don't know. It's so easy to tell other people.
Sure.
But just from my own experience, I would have allowed so much more time for the two mothers to tell their stories, because one of the things about Palestinian mothers is they hardly ever get a chance to tell their story. And apart from that, they also are beholden to the community. And so to say very easily, I forgive, or I understand, or I'm against violence, or any of that stuff. She comes from the Haitian refugee camp. It would be very brave of her to be able to make that statement. So it takes a lot of time. It takes time to get to the point where you think, I will say, look, I get a lot of death threats and all kinds of stuff like that here because I take a stand which offends quite a lot of people. And that stand, if you take on the Palestinian side, is even braver in many ways.
Can be life-threatening. Robbie,
Yes.
I want to ask you, what gives you hope? Because someone who's as involved and active as you are must be acting within hope.
Of course, we can't afford to give up hope. You know, I can go and live in South Africa and knit sweaters. But the point is that I look at my grandchildren in their eyes, and I think to myself, how can I not do something to try and make this difference? And what gives me hope is the mother of Abu Khadir, who comes and talks and says that the pain of all mothers is the same. The tears are the same color.
The pain
what more could you want?
The same. Robbie, Damelin, Hila Medalia, thank you both for being here today.
Thank you.
And that wraps up today's show. We'll, of course, be back here tomorrow for a new look at reality in high definition. We're on every night, 10 p.m. Eastern, and we'll have a new documentary for you that you don't want to miss. Thank you for watching.
For example, my father was born in Safed in the north of Israel in 1935. He grew up with a lot of Palestinians. In my generation, we saw Palestinians. You know, they used to work in Israel. We used to go sometime to the West Bank, and there was some interaction. And unfortunately, kids that are growing up today in Tel Aviv and Palestinian kids, they could very likely not see and meet each other in person, which I think is very tragic, because if we want to solve the conflict, I think the first way, it was incredibly difficult to bring them together actually physically in the same place. And I think that's and actually the way that the meeting between the mothers happened in the film is really reflective of reality today, unfortunately, still today.
The fact that both peoples are living so close, yet they have no chance of talking to one another or having I guess, a normal social interaction.
I wouldn't say it this way. What I would say is that
Today in Jerusalem explores the Palestinian-Israeli conflict through the personal loss of two mothers, reflecting the conflict as seen through their eyes. Over 15 years have passed since the beginning of the Second Intifada, and the cycle of violence hasn't gone anywhere. It has simply changed its form. From suicide bombings to car rammings and knives, many Palestinians are still living in refugee camps without basic rights, and the word peace seems to have lost its meaning. Who will be courageous enough to bring it back on the negotiating table, and how many more mothers will have to lose their loved ones for nothing before someone wakes up? I'm joined in studio by documentary filmmaker Hila Medalia, who produced To Die in Jerusalem, and Robbie Damelin, whose son David was shot and killed by a sniper while serving in the Israeli army. She is also the international relations spokesperson of the Parents Circle Families Forum. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So I'd like to start with you and start with the film. You said the conversation reflected reality as it is and is a microcosm of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Do explain.
So I actually started the film in 2002, shortly after this bombing that portrays in the film happened. And I've been following the mothers of the two dead girls, the mother of the Israeli girl and the mother of the Palestinian suicide bomber, on this 4 years journey where at the end they met. And actually, though Jerusalem and the Haitian refugee camps is only 4 miles away,